Sorry, Professor Hankinson Nelson?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Stefano. I'm a ISS student, and I read that you teach philosophy of science. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you have 2 minutes for me?
Well, sure.
Can I sit?
Certainly.
Thank you so much. So, what is the course about?
Well, it's a course that takes science as its subject matter and studies science. It asks questions like what science is, how scientists reason, what's the nature of the evidence for scientific theories. And it covers a variety of sciences, both historical cases and sciences that look at historical cases, as well as contemporary cases, to show the different ways that scientists draw inferences from what they can observe to what they cannot, to, again, amass evidence in support of a hypothesis, to test a hypothesis. We also look at scientific revolutions, how they occur. We look at what the nature of scientific objectivity is, which many people attribute to science. And so it's an in-depth study of science, and we go through a number of different sciences and different cases to try to get a full picture of what science is.
So, what are the key terms, are the key themes that we're going to touch in the course?
Well, obviously the most key is science. But then following from that is evidence. What is the nature of scientific evidence? And also logic, because we look at scientific reasoning in terms of its logical forms. How does the evidence relate to the hypothesis? How strong is that support? Another key term is argument, and that's because one of the tools of philosophy is to study and evaluate arguments. Arguments are sets of statements, one of which is a main claim or a conclusion, and at least one reason given to support it. We assume you have to have a reason. You just can't believe something very strongly. So our authors offer arguments, and we learn to evaluate them, their strength, their views about science, and offer arguments of our own to support our evaluations. So that's another key term. A final key term, which has to do with the very nature and methods of philosophy as a discipline, is the phrase conceptual analysis. So we find that many concepts which might appear to be clear and obvious are in fact understood differently by different people. They're not quite as precise as they might be. And so we work hard at making concepts as clear and differences between the way people use them as clear. So a perfect example of that would be the concept of objectivity. For some people it refers to the very nature of scientific knowledge. For some people it refers to an attitude of scientists, that they don't bring their personal biases to bear. So we try to get real straight about how someone is using a concept, clarifying it in our own usage, if need be. So those are some of the very important key terms.
So science, reasoning, argument, conceptual analysis, scientific revolutions, conceptual analysis, I said it already, objectivity. So when you say science, and the degree is called social science, what's the difference between science and social science? I'm a little bit confused.
Well, in general terms, the understanding has been that the social sciences are focused on humans and on social institutions, social practices, social relations, as opposed to, although there's some overlap, looking at our biological makeup. Now, there are some who would argue that there are things about our biological makeup that carry over into the social realm. But typically the social scientist is looking at humans and looking at human social institutions, trying to clarify their very nature, how they work. Very often, for example, in the case of science, which is a thoroughly human social enterprise, how science in fact relates to other social institutions, what social factors are at work in science communities, how do other social institutions like the federal government, which supplies funding for the sciences, how does that interact with science? How might it impact the directions that science goes? So science itself, not just social science, but that's one of the key terms that I mentioned to you. But precisely what it is, some people would say it's a set of methods. Some people would say it's a body of knowledge. Some people would say it's just a social institution and study in that regard. But those are some of the key things that social sciences have in common.
Yeah. How do this concept reflect back to everyday life? So why do I need to know what science is or what reasoning is when it comes down to my everyday life?
Well, I think there are several reasons we could cite. First of all, science in our lifetime, and this has been the case in prior lifetimes, but right now it's certainly the case, that you take something like an area of genetic testing, where we can identify genes that predispose you to a disease, but there are not yet, for the most part, genetic therapies or cures. We take the debates over climate change, we take the debates over evolution. Just in general terms, science literacy is terrifically important just to live as a citizen. You're going to have to make decisions about how you're going to live your life. And hopefully they will be informed by the best science. When it comes to the social sciences, their theories and their studies and their research and what they provide by way of statistical analysis also are going to have a direct impact on your life. What does economic theory tell you in terms of the overall well-being and how it functions of our economic system? And these are things, again, which are going to impact you. So both science in general and the social sciences in particular, because they are studying us, are terrifically important for being able to make decisions, arrive at positions that will underwrite such decisions, or even in the case of genetic testing, we might find ourselves in a position where we're judging others. So, for example, if you know ahead of time because of prenatal testing that your fetus is going to be born, the baby's going to be born with some crippling disability, people might judge you whether you continue the pregnancy or because you feel you shouldn't for the sake of the suffering of the child. They might judge you for that too. And so all of these kinds of issues are going to have an impact.
Yeah. Why did you decide to teach this course?
Well, I teach philosophy of science in general. It's my field of expertise. But I became really interested in the ISS major in particular, precisely because it provides access to people who might not be able to finish college. It provides those final 2 years in a degree, which, as we all know, is just terrifically important. And in my own case, I quit college after my sophomore year. It was the wild days of the 60s. Many of us did. We wrote poetry and played guitars and did all those things. And then reality came about, and I found myself to be a single mother without a college degree. So my options in terms of employment and so forth were very, very limited. But back then, in the late 70s and 80s, there weren't any online courses. And it was really a struggle for me with daycare, and I was doing part-time work cleaning houses. To get to school, I had to borrow cars because there wasn't any transportation in a public way. It was hard to be on the campus because I really needed to be at home taking care of my child and or working and or both. And so I see this this population that I think will benefit. I was a member of that population, and I know the difference the degree makes. And I also know that having the ability to do this online and to access the expertise of faculty at an institution that is as serious and as highly ranked as this one is just a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And I just wanted to be part of it. I care a lot about these students because firsthand experience, I was one.
Well, that was very helpful, and it was a pleasure to meet you.
It was a pleasure to meet you too.
Thank you so much.
I wish you the best.
Oh, thank you, and you have a beautiful day.
Thank you.
Thank
you
you
too.